that the court could not simply pick up from where the previous judge had stopped. Doing so would amount to continuing a process already declared defective, something the law does not allow. Instead, the judge emphasized that strict compliance with legal procedure is not optional, especially in serious criminal matters where an individual's liberty is at stake. Where those procedures are not followed, the court has not only the authority but the obligation to intervene and correct the situation. And that is exactly what happened. In a final and binding order, the court directed that the case must start afresh, a complete reset, a trial de novo. Every charge must be presented again, every piece of evidence must be reintroduced, every witness must testify again under oath. Nothing from the previous trial can be carried forward. It is, in every sense, a return to square one. But the judge was careful to clarify an important point. This decision does not determine whether Nnamdi Kanu is guilty or innocent. Instead, it ensures that any future judgment will be based on a process that fully complies with the law. In other words, the focus is not just on the outcome, but on how that outcome is reached. Justice must not only be done, it must be done properly. With the slate wiped clean, both sides now find themselves back at the starting line on equal legal footing. For the prosecution, this means rebuilding the entire case from the ground up, ensuring that every procedural requirement is strictly followed and that all evidence is properly presented. For the defense, it opens a new opportunity to challenge the charges, question the evidence, and raise legal objections from the very beginning. The ruling reinforces a fundamental principle of criminal justice. The integrity of a trial is just as important as its result. A conviction obtained through a flawed process cannot stand, no matter the circumstances. The court made it clear that adherence to due process is not a mere formality. It is the backbone of the legal system. Digging deeper into the reasoning behind the decision, the court identified several critical areas where the earlier proceedings failed to meet legal standards. One of the first issues examined was procedural compliance. In criminal law, procedure is everything. Each stage of the trial must follow clearly defined rules, from arraignment to the presentation of evidence. The court found that certain steps in the earlier trial did not fully comply with these requirements, and when procedure is compromised, the entire process is called into question. Another key issue was the validity of the charges themselves. For a criminal case to stand, the charges must be properly framed and supported by the law. The judge found aspects of the charges raised serious legal concerns. If the foundation of a case is weak, any structure built upon it is bound to collapse. That is exactly what happened here. The court also took a close look at the right to a fair hearing, a cornerstone of the Nigerian constitution. Every defendant is entitled to adequate time to prepare a defense, access to legal representation, and a trial free from bias. Where there is any doubt about fairness, the law requires that such doubt be resolved in favor of protecting the defendant's rights. In this case, concerns about fairness further weakened the validity of the earlier proceedings. Jurisdiction was another critical factor. Without proper jurisdiction, a court has no authority to hear a case, and any action it takes becomes legally void. The judge examined whether the court, as previously constituted, exercised its powers correctly. Any irregularity in this area is enough to invalidate an entire trial. The handling of evidence also came under scrutiny. Evidence must be presented and admitted according to strict legal rules. The court observed inconsistencies in how evidence was treated in the earlier trial, raising doubts about the reliability of the outcome. A conviction must be based on credible and properly admitted evidence. Anything less cannot stand. The judge further noted issues with continuity of proceedings. A trial must follow a clear and consistent sequence. Interruptions, irregular transitions, or procedural shortcuts can create gaps that undermine the integrity of the case. In this instance, such gaps contributed to the court's decision to nullify the entire process. After considering all these factors together, the court reached a single, unavoidable conclusion. The defects were fundamental, not superficial. They could not be corrected or ignored. The only lawful solution was to set aside the entire trial. With that decision now in effect, the case enters a completely new phase. The next step will be the formal arraignment, where the charges are read again in open court and the defendant enters a plea. This marks the official beginning of the new trial. From there, the case will move into pre-trial proceedings. Both sides will organize their filings, and the prosecution will disclose all evidence it intends to rely on. The defense will have full access to these materials, ensuring transparency and fairness. At this stage, the defense may also raise preliminary objections, including motions to challenge the validity of the charges. If the court finds merit in such objections, the charges could be dismissed before the trial even begins. If not, the case will proceed to full trial. During the trial, the prosecution will present its case by calling witnesses and introducing evidence. Each witness will be subject to cross-examination, allowing the defense to test their credibility. This process is essential in determining the strength of the case. Once the prosecution closes its case, the court will decide whether there is enough evidence to require a defense. If not, the defendant may be discharged immediately. If yes, the defense will present its case, aiming to create reasonable doubt. Finally, both sides will submit their closing arguments, and the judge will deliver judgment based on the evidence and the law. The possible outcomes remain open: acquittal, conviction, or dismissal of charges. What is certain, however, is that this case has been completely reset. The past no longer holds any legal weight. Everything that follows will be determined anew, under strict adherence to due process and constitutional standards. This ruling stands as a powerful reminder that the justice system must constantly guard its integrity. When errors occur, they must be corrected, no matter how significant the case. And now, all eyes turn to the next chapter of this unfolding legal battle, as the retrial begins under a clean and lawful framework.